So I know it's been beyond forever since I posted a video here, but a fair amount has been happening. Namely, I am in the job market. I have been getting my resume polished, and I'm going to be looking towards the future and looking towards jobs coming up. So what I wanted to talk about in this video was my thoughts on the future of transportation in this country, in the United States. So to start with, I recently came back from a trip, a weekend trip to see one of my family members in the next state over from where I live. And it was a really awesome trip. We took the Tesla, which, by the way, has 2,200 trouble-free miles on it. Not a single problem. And so the supercharging was just fantastic. We just pulled in, plugged in, and went to get a bite to eat. I mean, that's how wonderful it is. If you time the supercharging stops to your meals, or to, if you want to get out and explore, that's one of the, a lot of people are saying, well, why don't you just supercharge in 5 minutes? That's coming. I believe that is coming once all the version 3 chargers are online, and you don't necessarily need to charge all the way, back up. I can tell you that on the way back, one of the chargers we were at suggested we only stop for 15 minutes, but the driver, one of my relatives, wanted to get an additional, little bit of range for the just in case scenario. But no, everything was just fantastic. And a lot of people say, well, why don't you charge in 5 minutes? I honestly think that that's a mistake. And let me explain why. The reason I feel that charging in 5 minutes is a mistake is because when you get out of the supercharging stops, which for the Tesla Model 3, if you drive consciously and you are very careful, you don't speed, you could probably be driving for about 2-3 hours. After that 2 to 3 hours, you're going to want to get out. You're going to want to walk around. And I honestly think that as a country, a lot of people are saying that we need to get more exercise. I think that these longer supercharging stops would be wonderful for that. Even if it is only 15 minutes, quote unquote, that's still enough time to get out and stretch your legs and really go for a nice walk. And what would be really cool is, depending on, and this is just an idea, okay? And I'm talking about, this is completely off the top of my head. What I was thinking was if they had some supercharging stops near hiking trails, right? Near hiking trails, so you could actually go out and spend some time outdoors, taking a look at the forests or the mountains, and taking in nature while your car charges up. And then when you come back, ready to go on the next leg of your journey, you'll have even more memories. So that's what I think. Honestly, when we got to our destination, the hotel we had what is called a destination charger, which in simple terms is basically just a home charger. The same 240 volt level 2 charger that we have at home. It was an older version, but it worked. And we were able to charge up at the hotel, and it's just fantastic. I do think that one of the major perks of Tesla ownership is that supercharger network, and it pains me to see that it's a much, much, much slower process for charger usage. Like, we have several superchargers in my area, and a lot of them get pretty constant use. On occasions, especially on holidays, some chargers are filled to capacity. Whereas we have a non-Tesla charger at a local Best Buy not far from my house, and I have never seen a single vehicle plug in. Now, granted, For most EV owners, the charging takes place at home. But at the same time, it just bugs me that you spend all this time to install a charger and it's not getting really any use. I mean, we really need to jumpstart this, you know? Something else too, and this has to do with the actual trip itself. So on the way down, I noticed that there was a major divide. So you have 2 lanes of traffic going one way and 2 lanes of traffic going the other way. And then right here, kind of where my nose is, that's land, right? That's basically, you know, if you're in the Midwest, it's grass. If you're in the Southwest, it's, you know, dirt, desert, that sort of thing. There is enough of that, I think, to where we could very easily build a high-speed rail network throughout this country. And some states are really going to town on it. Like, I don't live in Texas, but I've been keeping up on this as a transit enthusiast. If I remember correctly, I think it's between Dallas and Houston, there's going to be a bullet train built, that is essentially the same thing as what the Japanese have on their high-speed Shinkansen routes. That excites me. That genuinely excites me. But instead of seeing it just 1 or 2 states, why not have it across the entire nation, right? Pick an interstate, because we do have enough room. I honestly feel we do have enough room to just create the track right along one of the main interstates. Not replace it, but add to it, if that makes sense. So why not do that, you know? And a lot of people are saying, well, a lot of people don't really want this. I think that my generation, and especially my cousin's generation, he just turned 2. When he's my age, we're going to need to have something like this in this country. I really believe that we are going to have something like this in this country, a high-speed rail network that could potentially replace domestic air travel in some situations. Electrically driven, renewable energy. We're going to need this. We really are, because, you know, with climate change and all the pollution, it's just getting really bad. And what's interesting is, I told you I'm a transit enthusiast, and lately I've been really interested in Japan's rail network, because if anybody wants to look at how rail networks should be built, Japan is one of the examples. I'm not saying it's the example, because I've been watching a couple of documentaries, and because they're so confined for space, they have to be really creative with how they route the trains. But just about every single train on those tracks, with the exception of rural areas, is electrically driven through what is called a pantograph. And pantograph is basically an arm that goes on top of the train and makes connection with what is essentially telephone wires. And that's why I'm saying, here in the United States, if we routed a high-speed rail network along our existing telephone wire infrastructure and expanded it, right? I don't see why we couldn't go ahead and have a dedicated rail line. Now, obviously, the wires would have to be dedicated for rail transport, but what I'm saying is, we add on to what we already have, making the cost of construction cheaper, right? And it is slowly starting to happen. But here's the deal. You know, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, the administration, blah, 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 blah. Now, I'm personally not a fan of the current administration, as a lot of you know. I will not get into that here, okay? I'm going to keep that out. But I will say this. A lot of people try to say, well, we can't do this because this, and that. I think part of the problem is we've become so ingrained and so comfortable with the way things are that we do not, quote unquote, dare to dream anymore. And what I mean by this is, in order to truly have something sustainable, as in planet nationwide and even planet-wide, I think it's going to have to, but it's going to take a serious rewriting of our thought processes, in the sense that if we dream it, we can do it. You know, constraints be damned. Now, of course, we're going to have natural constraints. We're going to have volcanoes. We're going to have rivers. Oh, excuse me. We're going to have, weather to contend with. Those are natural constraints. But in terms of societal and social constraints, that's all up here. All it really takes is a change of thought, and we can do anything. Seriously, we can do anything. And I genuinely feel that if we had the willpower, we could build a kick-ass rail system in this nation. We used to have the top-of-the-line rail network in this country before the big oil companies came and took it out, right? This was back, you can look this up on YouTube. It's in our history. The big oil, the General Motors, all the car companies were like, we need to push this because we're not going to survive. And it is that greed that has put us so far behind in our sustainability efforts compared to Europe and other nations. Now, we are working on it, but here's what I'm seeing, okay? We are working on it, but we're coming along at a snail's pace where we need to be traveling faster than the fastest train in the world by miles in order to really do something. And I genuinely believe that a sustainable form of domestic transport for the United States could be a network of high-speed trains, stations in every major city, and even stations in smaller towns that could be used as transfer hubs. Like I said, Japan is a great example of this. They've got stations all over the country for their Shinkansen bullet train, and a lot of those stations are transfer stations for local commuter lines. I think that we really, really, really need to jump on this. Because if we don't, I don't even want to think about what's going to happen. As far as transport here off the rails, in my area in particular, Teslas have exploded. There usually isn't a time that doesn't go by when I go out where I don't see at least one or two Teslas, I would say every other day. I mean, they really, really exploded as far as the usage is concerned. And I'll be honest with you, it was this high demand for these cars, for these electric cars, that actually made me a bit worried on the supercharging trips. I was very, very closely monitoring the status of the superchargers where we were going to make sure that we would have actual space to charge, and thankfully it wasn't a problem. But with Rivian, with Tesla, with BMWs coming out with their own electric cars, I think that going forward, everybody who is going to be buying a car should be buying electric. And a lot of people are saying, well, it doesn't suit my needs. Fair enough. Okay. I take that as a very valid criticism. It's not right for everybody at the moment. But with the way things are going with battery technology, I think that's genuinely going to change. A lot of people, back in the 1920s, they called it the roaring 20s, right? I honestly think we need to call this the whirring 20s, as in the whir of an electric motor. Because I really do think this is going to be the decade. This has to be the decade. A lot of people are saying, oh, that's just marketing, blah, 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 blah. I'm dead serious when I say we need to do something. We need to accelerate the adoption of a sustainable transport, both privately and publicly. We need to get off fossil fuels. We need to get onto renewable energies. We need to find ways of getting around A lot of young people, um, are thinking about ditching their cars and biking and walking. Now, in my case, that's not necessarily doable all year round. And the reason is because I live in an area where it gets extremely hot in the summer to the point where it would be too dangerous to walk around, especially in July. But a lot of young people, like I told you earlier, I'm in the job market, and I'm thinking about if I did have to move, I'd want to move to a city with an electrically driven light rail system that I could use to get to work and to the store, and to basically cut my personal reliance on fossil fuel driven transportation down to near zero. And if I lived in a condo where I could see about making some modifications, I would like to be able to run my house off of the main grid as well, using not off of the main grid, excuse me, but basically be grid free, right? Completely renewable energy. And now I know that a lot of plants have transitioned to nuclear, but I did some Googling, and it turns out those plants, while nuclear energy itself is renewable, the ore that they're using to power the reactors is not. So we need to see about looking into that. But I would like to see plants that are run on wind, on solar. And I actually saw something earlier today. They said that a lot of people are really angry about these wind farms. Here's the way I look at it, okay? A lot of people are hard up for money, right? Especially the rural farmers. They're in a bad way, right? So here's what I'm thinking. If you want to install renewable energy source, do it under the provision that these companies would give some of their profits to these people as a thank you for letting them use their land, right? And that's for now. The ideal solution, in my opinion, is that we need to get rid of money entirely, in the sense that we need to move to a system of intrinsic motivation, where we do something just because we want to, for the love of our neighbor, right? Not because it's going to put the next Benjamin Franklin in our pocket. We've got to get away from that. Unfortunately, with the way the human brain is wired and how we don't necessarily like change, asking for that and trying to get a sustainable energy grid for transportation and for other uses is a very, very tall order for a lot of people. So we gotta do what we can. And right now the priority is the sustainable energy grid. But as I alluded to in the beginning, that is so easy because all it really is willpower. A lot of people would hide behind the economy, behind the dollar. And this is, again, why I said we need to get rid of money, because we need to move to a society where intrinsic motivation, what is in here, matters more than what is, around me right now. My computer, my Google Home, that sort of thing. And as I said, it really is just a matter of willpower. And I'm speaking as somebody who has a lot of things, and I've been genuinely thinking that if I move to my own place, I'm going to sell a lot of this stuff, because part of me genuinely feels guilty for having it. I mean, we need to really slam on the brakes and do a major 180 on our society, or we're going to end up driving ourselves off of a cliff, right? So, but no, I think that as far as transportation goes, an electrically driven domestic high rail system, where somebody who's in San Francisco could take a bullet train out to Las Vegas in one jump, or somebody who is, down in Fort Lauderdale could see their relative up in New York in one jump. Now, again, we are working on this, but it just seems to me like we should be there already, and we would have been there if it wasn't for the greedy oil companies. And I think a lot of people are really starting to those that don't care about the almighty dollar above all else are really starting to open their eyes and say, hey, we got to do something, and we got to do something now. My only hope is that it's not too late. What's your take? Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.